Good morning, it's Vaughan at westcoastbellpottery.ca in Nova Scotia, Canada. We have a sunny day today. Everybody's feeling like spring is finally here. Daffodils are out, crocuses, forsythias on the hedge, so we're on the way up, and summer's coming. But anyway, this is the video which I'm going to release that's called Knobs, Lips and Handles. We've had 4 videos so far on beginner pottery, basically mugs, bowls and plates. So today I'm going to do jars, which is basically a mug, can be a cylinder, can be a little bellied, or it can be hugely bellied, but it will have a lid. And lips, it's basically the cylinder that you've done already, and you just make a lip. And then handles, there are various ways of putting handles on, so I'll go into that as well. Okay, I'm going to skip over this fairly fast because we've now learned how to center clay and make a basic form. And what we're interested in this video is how to make lids, handles, lips, and probably feet as well. So we're just speeding this up so you can get to the point where it will become necessary for me to say something new. So when you get a little kind of chamber or a little gallery for your lid to sit in, you need to thicken up the rim at the top. So as you do these pulls, you need to make sure it gets a little thicker at the top. Alright, so I'm going to press that top edge a little flatter and it'll get thicker, being careful not to press too hard so that it actually buckles the clay underneath. But you need to thicken it up enough so that we can create a little shelf for a lid to sit on. So it's delicate, but you need to support the body of the piece while you're actually pressing down. And now we're going to make a little cut line in the middle of that space. Just a little cut down, maybe only 5 millimeters down or so. And then we're using a wooden rib, and that's got wet so that it will lubricate as you go in that little space where the cut was made, and it pushes down the inner edge and makes a little chain, like a little shelf. And it's down about 3/8 of an inch, probably about 5 to 8 millimeters down, I suppose. Enough so we can add a bowl which will be thrown upside down to actually place in there. And if you actually put too much pressure on, you can actually tear that, but so be careful as you push that down. And now we're just creating some defining lines in the form to give the glaze areas where it will break over. And I'm going to really kind of belly this out a little bit too. Remember, with a rib, like the metal thin rib, it doesn't have much drag, and so you can press on the outside and it won't actually buckle your form even if you get a thin wall, because there's not much drag on that. The friction just isn't much. So you can get all your water off and you can create that little belly shape. And then finish the foot nicely. You don't have to trim much at all if you do this little extra stuff on the foot when you're throwing it. If you throw very thickly, it's not worth doing that, but when you get a little bit more confident and you can throw your pots fairly thin, you can actually put that foot on and literally just have to sponge the bottom of your piece at the end. When it gets to leather hard, you don't have to trim. You could actually just sponge the base. We're just adding little elements that the glaze will basically sit in and give you some dark crevices. The glaze runs off the mountains and it actually gathers in the valleys, as we were told. Okay, I'm just going to measure the flange gap here so I know what size my lid needs to be. Alright, this is a tiny little piece of clay. I don't remember how many grams it was, but we're talking here like a quarter of a pound of clay. And it's just enough so I can make a small, very flat bowl. So when you did the videos on making bowls, this is the tiniest one you'll ever need to make. Literally just a little bowl, push your finger underneath, just so you have a little edge to lift it a bit so it's not totally flat, and then open it up. And I do these by eye because I've done so many of them, but I always make them a little bigger than I need, because it's easy to actually cut it down when you're trimming, but it'd be really hard to make it fit if it was too small. So just make sure you open it up a little bit bigger than you need. Okay, I'm going to throw another jar. It's like about 3 pounds of clay, 2.5, 3 pounds of clay. And we're going to make it so that it has a different type of lid, which actually has a flange on the actual lid itself that will sit inside the opening of this jar, and then the actual flange or the shelf sits over the top of the rim. It's an easier lid to make than the other one I just showed you. So if you are actually looking to make lids quickly, I think this is the option you should choose, and you'll see why. It's just such an easy process to do this one. Okay, we're gonna make a lid this time with a little bit more clay. I would say we've got about half a pound of clay here, maybe just over. It all depends on the size of the opening that you are going to be making the lid for. So just center as you normally do, as you can see, and then put your finger down about almost an inch or 2 centimeters away from the center, and then you push down and you create this little knob. By the way, you're pushing down and pushing your finger towards the center. It actually creates an instant knob, and you can make it get a little taller by just throwing it as like it's a little pot inside of this tray that you've got underneath it. But don't let it dry out, because if it drags at all, you can literally sort of snap this knob off. So it needs to be quite lubricated. And then the flange is actually done by pushing your little finger on the outside, on your right hand, just on the outside, and pushing it in, so you create like an overhang above your little finger. And if you can do it by eye, great, but measure it and then you'll see whether it's the right size, and you may have to adjust it slightly by pressing towards the outer edge here, and then it goes further over your little finger, so it will open it up a little bit. And if you had to make it smaller, you'd push with your finger underneath the flange and press in a little bit, and so you can adjust that height just to, whichever direction you want to go. Now it's important that when you put the calipers down here, that the flange actually is much wider at its furthest, widest part than the calipers, and then the inner ring should actually be smaller than the gap between the caliper points, and that way the lid will fit inside the actual opening in the jar that you've made. Okay, I have centered this piece of clay, and now I'm throwing a small ice cream cone in the center there and making it thinner and thinner as it goes up, so that eventually I got this small little bit of clay, the point of the ice cream cone, of course, and then that is where we're going to make a knob. So literally, you push down a little bit here, and what we're going to do next is squeeze with our fingers just below the upper point, where you can actually make that little knob sort of rise up a little bit, and then just kind of flatten it a little bit with your finger as it's spinning. But your fingers are pinched in, and so you have a knob shape, which you can actually refine a little bit, and then using a needle you can actually cut this right off, and these are very rapid to make. I think I have to make like 16 of these in this set of jars, and it would literally take maybe 5-6 minutes to make all of them. So now I've made all the knobs. I've got a big lump of clay left over, so I'm just going to throw another one of the jars so I can make another lid for this one. And this is pretty much a similar jar as the last one. Okay, these are how I'm going to do the knobs. Just dampen your wheel a little bit. These are the lids that we threw. They're about 2 hours drying out like that, and then I turn them upside down now. Let's see whether this is damp. You can actually dampen the rim a little bit over the piece. Turn it over and put it on your little ring so you can center it instantly. That way I don't have to do any fancy tap centering or anything. Now it is stuck because the water makes that clay stick, but you'll have to wire it off afterwards, or maybe force it. Sometimes will just lift right off. So you trim it. Now we know it's got some thickness the way I throw these, so when you're throwing, if you make sure they're a bit over thick, and that way you can put some pressure on this without it collapsing. Then make yourself one of these, if you haven't already, sewing needles and a piece of Fimo clay. And then you can score several pieces of, needles like that. Just kind of make it really much faster to score. Whoops. Then wet it. Get older too, it's weird. Comes from wearing glasses. I didn't have to wear glasses until I was like early 50s, so I guess I got away with it for a long time. It's a good idea also to make some circles on that. So you can tell when you pick your little knob up. And remember, we threw these with a little bit of extra clay. So when you cut them off, they look like that. So you've got some clay that you can push down. Place it on the top where it's in those circles that you just made. Before you stick it down, turn it around, have a look to make sure it's centered. And then put a little pressure on. If it's in center completely, that's great. But if it's not, it doesn't matter as long as it's not crazily off center. I just put pressure. There you go. Look at that. Then use a little modeling tool. And that little lip of clay that you left on there, you simply smudge down onto your top. And then, you just kind of use the modeling tool if you want, just to kind of smooth it in really nicely. Now what I don't do is put any hard pressure on there, because it will twist that stem. So even though it's a little kind of uneven, not bad actually, but I just use a paintbrush. And I don't put a lot of pressure on either. Just a paintbrush to smooth it out regular. And then the paintbrush will actually really get it nice again. And that's it. Now, sometimes you can just release it by pushing hard. Ooh. There you go. And let's get to the edge. Make sure you put lots of pressure on as more, broader surface area as possible. Then you can get your little knob off. And that's how to put a lid. So these lids are a bit more time consuming than the other lid where the knob is thrown into the piece. Okay, if you're a beginner, and we've been doing cylinders, bowls, plates, narrow forms, at some point you've got to put lips and handles on things, put nice interesting feet on things to kind of accent your pieces. It's a way of almost like a decoration thing, really. If you're a beginner, pulling handles is hard. So I'm going to show you a quick way. If you want to just get going and be able to make handles consistently, you can get yourself what's called a handle tool, which will actually make it very easy for you. But you must learn how to pull handles, because it's actually way quicker eventually. So wet the tool when you get one, whatever shape you choose. These are made by Bill Wright from artisanpotterytools.com. And lots of people make these kind of things. So, but anyway, that one. And then you pull it through like this. And if you're lucky, it pulls it all the way out. And then you just lift it up. And you have a consistently nice handle that you could apply to a piece of pottery. And if you bet a block of clay or a slab of clay rolled out about a 3/8 of an inch thick, half an inch, 3/8 of an inch thick, you can make lots of these handles very quickly. I have videos on doing these. So if you're looking at more of those, you can do that. The other way, and this is what I would say is just for you to get going and being a beginner, you need to make some pieces, get yourself a handle tool, but eventually you're going to have to pull handles. Pulling handles is basically like milking a cow. You basically wet your hand for lubrication. You wet the block of clay, which should be new clay or thoroughly wedged clay. And you stroke the clay 5 times at the most. I usually do 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. I'm a 4 person. There you go. And then basically turn it around. So don't pull the same side all the time. Keep your hand wet, turn it around. About 180 degrees actually, so you're working on both sides of it. It makes a handle that's the shape of the gap between your thumb and your first finger. And depending on what you've got to put a handle on, I have one big jug and a bunch of middle jugs. I think I might even have a couple of small ones too. But that's a handle for a big jug. So we're going to snap that off. The first thing as well is your hands are slippery. When you snap it off, I actually twist the ball above where I've got the handle, as well as the handle part itself. So it kind of smudges the thing into my hand. Let's put that down on here. So it sticks to my hand and doesn't drop in the bucket. So we'll do a small one now. Once you've got one going, it's nice because you've got the other part started. Turn it around. You do it until you've got to make sure it doesn't get sticky, because if it gets sticky, it pulls off before you've shaped it properly. And if you're not ready, it just falls in the bucket. So I usually get the water off my hand like that, and then twist top and bottom, pull it off, put it down. The third style of handle I want to show you is from just a coil of clay. So you have to learn how to roll a coil. The way I do it is to push forward with weight and pull back without any weight, and push forward again, pull back, releasing the pressure when you pull back. Roll it forward, and then hopefully you can avoid the ovaling that happens a lot of time when people roll coils. The clay sort of tends to oval out instead of being round. So pressure forward, light coming back. And then if it's a handle, it should taper to a thinner area at the bottom. Doesn't have to, it's just the way I do it. And next, without a lot of pressure, I choose a stick that's generally not too sharp. I just sort of lightly let the weight of the stick make a sort of a rope pattern on the handle. So I'm not putting any weight on the wood, it's just the weight of the wood. And if you want to, you can do it the other way around too. And it will give it a nice pattern for the actual glaze to sort of, you can see what you get. And you can cut it off if you want to, whatever level you want. I guess I should probably leave it that length for now. And then we're going to put some handles on if the pieces are dry enough. We're also going to do lips as part of this video. So this is how I produce a lip. I wet fingers and thumb, I thin out an area, the width of the lip that I want to create. So you've got a sharp edge there. I put a finger and a thumb, and some people can do it, if you can widen your fingers enough, you can do it like that. But I try to put my finger and thumb either side, and then using a wet finger, you rub just enough pressure so that the wall bends over. Backwards and forwards. And this is just the way I make my lips. There probably are lots of other ways, but we're keeping this basics. We're just trying to make it so you have a body of work to try selling your work. Then I often put my thumb on the inside and just push that lip to it kind of flatten the corner there. To give you that shape like that. And then I take a brush and I just kind of clean it up. And it's nice if the lip is symmetrical. So take a look at it. Oh, that's pretty, no, that's not quite. I need to just work on it just there. It wasn't bad. Now, if a lip turns over a bit and is quite sharp, it doesn't drip down the wall of the pot. Robin Hopper used to cheat. He told us at a workshop that he would dab butter on his spout before he poured, just to make sure that it didn't drip. I was back in Worcester, Ohio, in the 1980s, I think, when Robin Hopper did a workshop at the Wayne Center of the Arts. All right, so we've got a nice spout, That's one. Wet finger and thumb. So just making an area the width of the spout that you want to create a little thinner. And then I put my finger, thumb, and maybe I'll be able to reach with these fingers. It all depends on the size of your hand. Backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. I look at it to see if I'm getting a symmetrical shape from the top too, because you can change that a little bit by pushing to the side, pushing to the side. And then, like I did on the other one, you could put your thumb there, just inside here, and increase the angle that's actually going to. I was trying to do it that way so you can see. Increase the actual sharpness of the angle. Let's see if that's fairly symmetrical. There you go. So that's a spout. That's two spouts. Now, if you've got lots of things to put lips and handles on, I do it on a board where I've got 4 to 6 of these actually on a board when I'm doing it. And I put the lip on the inside. And I'll work my way all the way around. So once I've thinned out the lip on the inside, I then just go around like we did with the other jug. I just work on it, making sure it's getting fairly symmetrical. And do this all the way around. And then same again, you kind of work on that lip to kind of give it a better shape I like to push it in a little bit. You can do it just by flicking with your finger like that if you want to. But you're just giving that lip some extra special definition, some real character. You have to wet your finger or just flick up. So it's curving around your finger, like your thumb or your finger. But so that's what we have. And then, so for handles, I only pulled them like 15 minutes ago. I simply wet the area opposite the lip. This clay is about, I threw these about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, so it's still they're pretty soft. This way you don't have to score and scratch. Now that depends on your clay body too. Some clay bodies are really picky, like porcelains are really tricky for joining things together. But this is a regular gritty stoneware. Well, it's got a little grit, it's not over gritty, it's quite a nice smooth throwing body. But anyway, you've got your handles, which I only pulled 15 minutes ago. That's what it looks like. Fold over to thicken the area that's going to be in the join area. And then make sure you do it right opposite the lip. Well, before we totally join it, I'm now going to have a look and make sure it is. Yep, it's right. So I got that on there, and then I fold it down, fold it around, make sure I can get 3 fingers in there so that it's easy to pick this jug up. There you go, see it's straight. And then wiggle it, the bottom of these pots is very soft, just wiggle that handle. There's enough at the bottom to snap a little piece off. And then just curl it over to give it extra thickness there. And then if I was doing slips, I would use this little part to kind of push in the middle down there, because it gives the handle a really strong join at the bottom if you add that little bit of clay in there. And then I'm going to do the same all the way around. Now once we got all the handles on, I stick a paintbrush to the very bottom, put some pressure back on where the handle base is, and just push in with my thumb. I'm not pressing hard with the brush on the inside, it's just enough to actually give it some resistance. Once you've gone all the way around, use this part of the paintbrush to press down that little bit of clay. You don't have to put this bit of clay in there if you don't want to. I do it because it makes my handles really strong. I have people bring in pots back sometimes saying the handle broke off. And when they bring it back, it's broken here and here. And I say, well, you know, I actually joined it in the area that touches the jar, the mug, or the pitcher, whatever, like here and here. So if it's broke there and there, that tells me it was broken from dropping, not that my handle application was poor, shoddy or poor. So that's why I add the extra clay, because it's not going to break at that location. If they're dropping it, it's going to break here and here. There you go. And then you just simply have to smooth in all the areas that you've just applied all that pressure. I use the back of the paintbrush to, like a modeling tool, but just kind of hold the handle and shape it till you get a nice satisfying shape of the handle that looks like it's worked. Make sure it's opposite the spout. If it isn't quite opposite spout, you can press the spout and just open up the spout to one side to make it look a little bit more symmetrical. I think that one's pretty good. There you go, you can see. Next, if you want, you can decorate your handle. I use a little thumb addition there, which I call the home for the thumb. And check your spout, make sure that everything is nice and straight. Got it pretty good. One of my eyes is stronger than the other, so I have to compensate a little bit. I think a lot of people have that. One eye strength is stronger. But then make yourself a stamp. You know, it can be a little tree, it can be a little butterfly, a bird shape, or anything you want. I use a spiral, so I like to make sure people can identify my pieces without lifting them upside down. They can see that's my piece of work from that. You could even put your initials on a stamp and do it there, and that would be where you sign your pieces. That would be cool too. I've got an initial stamp myself, which I made in the 1980s. No, was it? No, it was the 70s. But now just making sure, because when you press that, sometimes you'll make it a little bit, sort of change the shape a little bit. So go back and just make sure that they're all nice and straight. Now you still have the other tool made handle. This is the one I pulled from the actual tool from artisanpotterytools.com. So this one is less soft than the ones that you pull, so that's an advantage because you can put them on sooner. So just wet it and then rub a bit of it with some water to make sure you've got a nice sticky area up there. And then it's applied the same way as the other ones. So you press it in the right place, move it around. Use your finger and thumb just to push it to get in against there. And then you're going to curve it the same way. You're going to put it down the bottom the same way. And then you're going to move it around a little bit. And then because you don't have the extra clay, I'm still going to push a little bit in between there. All right. I think I'm also going to apply a little bit of clay because there's a big dip in the middle, which is what I like about these handles, but it's very thin where it's applied to the pot there. So I'm pushing that in to help strengthen the joint below and above. Then we have to use the brush again on the inside. Put some pressure behind where the handle is and put your finger down and smudge it over. So you're getting that joint, and then you do that all the way around, the same as you did with the other board. This is the second board of jugs. I made 12, but this one now is a different shape, and you just work it in just like you do the other handles. Use a little bit of water on the brushes, the back of the paintbrush. You could use the ferrule of the brush, but this is duct taped up. I like this brush, so I keep repairing it. So the plastic of this brush is nice. I don't know what it's made of, but it's nylon probably or something, but it grabs the clay as you're modeling, just like a wooden modeling tool, and pulls it into the piece. And then you brush it in the same way as you did a regular pulled handle. But the glaze dribbles all the way down this gully. When I used this before to make some handles, the glaze was just really running a lot there, so you'd have to be aware of that when you're firing the pieces. It's a nice effect, but you don't want it to run too much and then stick to your kiln shelf. I'm trying to do this so you can see what I'm doing. That means I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, you can see you've got the effect of that. Where you'll get consistent handles as a beginner, and that's pretty well. I'm just going to open that up just a touch so this fairly symmetrical. Sometimes you'll have to work at them a little bit to get them symmetrical. But there you go, I think you can see it's pretty much opposite the spout there. Here is the last of the handles. See if I can get it right opposite. This is the little coil handle. Make sure you get it opposite once again. I do it this way upside down because I have it hanging over the edge. Let's slide it back just a touch. So this was that little coil, and basically I've got it really wet along one side. I've wet along here, and this is my own studio design. This isn't a traditional thing, but it's a novelty piece, I guess you might say. Place it and gently push it down. And work it in carefully. There are so many handle styles. You can learn a few basic ones just to get you into a selling mode, and then you can work a whole bunch of creative ideas that you come up with yourself. But it's nice if you get something that's a little shortcut. And this piece I do sell fairly often. It's a little sauce boat basically. So I'm just working that in. Same on this side here. I can do this so you can see. It's what I call an ergonomic handle. And then once it's attached, you can clean it up a bit. And then you need, when you turn it the right way up, to have a little strengthening device where the handle is hanging over the edge, it'll fall off a little bit. So I'll show you how I do that. So you can lift it, if it'll come off again. Turn it the right way up. It's very soft. Look at this, I can bend it all over the place. So, and then what I do, wet the rim a little bit. Make that little ball, stick it there, and then press it. And it joins to the handle a little bit. You can use your studio stamp, whatever you come up with. You can put your initials in there, whatever, but you're just making a little device that joins to this and supports it a little bit. And then I even use my little studio stamp right there to put that little spiral in. And then just brush over to make sure you've got nothing sharp. But it's a gravy boat, basically, or the spout needs to be reworked. I must have dented that, turning it over. There you go, you can see. So when you're holding it like that, whipping your omelette, you can tip it out. It's kind of an ergonomic handle. But now I can't actually sit this the right way up, and trimming it will have to be done on a chuck. Okay, this is the following day, and we have to turn this ugly mess into something nice, and that's by trimming. And we also have to put the lids on these actual flanges. So the first thing we're going to do is trim the bottom, and you can make a foot on a piece very easily, just using whatever trimming tool you use. The clay depends on the trimming tool. I use loop tools like this when the clay is quite well, just about leather hard. And then if I actually have to trim really dry clay, I have a variety of this tool is from artisanpotterytools.com, and this works really well on dry clay. And I have a sharpening stone here from Lee Valley Tools that if it ever blunts, you just kind of sharpen it up. And these are available from Lee Valley Tools, and just rub it like that, and you get a nice sharp edge on your tool again. Anyway, this clay is pretty soft, so I'm going to use my loop tool, and you just simply drag it across the surface. If it's bumping up and down, you kind of catch the bumps each way around until it gets really level, and then you can let it drag on the surface. And I always leave a thick base when I'm throwing, so I can put a foot on the inner side so I can glaze that little circle, which I think looks nice. And my signature that I put on the bottom of pieces shows through certain glazes. So that's why I only use certain glazes for the bottoms. But that way you give that kind of hollow, concave area there. And go down about 1/8 of an inch. You don't have to go too far down. Now, this bit is really irregular, so you hold your tool rigid and you let it catch until it will touch all the way around. So you're only taking off the mountains, not the valleys. Now it's dragging all the way around, and I press it in where I want the depth of the foot to be, depending on how I throw the pieces. And then just kind of let it, I can still feel a little bump in there, so I'm just kind of dragging that. Sometimes you can just use your finger and it'll kind of burnish the clay a little bit. But anyway, depth of the foot depends on how you threw the pieces on the inside, because you don't want to go too deep there, otherwise it might go all the way through. And don't worry if that happens, you just lose a piece every so often, and after a while you don't do that anymore. Okay, so we've got the bumps off, we've got a nice foot. There are tools available if you want to be very decorative with your foot. Let's see if I can clean this up a little bit. This has a profile so that you can press it in and you get a double groove. where your foot is, but once again you've got to be careful that you don't go too deep, otherwise you can go right through and actually separate the foot from the piece. So you have to make sure you leave enough clay at that bottom area, and then I usually just drag that just to knock any sort of roughness off from that tool. But I've got that nice double ring at the bottom of the piece. And there are other things that you can use. Bill Wright sells these tools too, which gives you that double ring instantly. Now I've noticed that if you're not careful, that sharp point there is going to be on the top, but this sharp point there is going to be at the bottom, and that's where you would separate the base from the actual pot if you go too deep there. So I grind off this sometimes to actually shorten that one, because it won't cut through as deep at that point, but you still get the double ring. That's a tip. All right, so we've got that, and then the last thing as a decorative element, Bill Wright also sells a whole bunch of these tools, and these are all ways of making your pot better. And once again, if you feel like it's a little blunt, you take one of your sharp your tool and you simply drag it across the grinding area. So all I'm doing is rubbing it like that, and it gives you a nice sharp edge. Okay, depending on the length of the tool, of course, the ring, these things from the gifting grip catch kind of high, so I can use the shorter ones like better. And you simply, depending on if you want a square chatter or you want to have an angled one, you can start and just do that. This is softer clay, remember, and not too hard. And if I want a pattern, I would leave it like there, but I like to get a texture. And there you got yourself a nice texture. Other tools have just a square edge. He has a lot of these tools available. And this one does like a cuneiform language mark. Alright, so you got a nice surface, which is optional. You don't have to go for something like this when you're a beginning potter, but if you feel you've got a flair for pottery, this is chattering, and it does kind of give you a nice surface for glazing. And I refine it just by putting in lines like that. It's a good idea just to brush. So we have a foot that we've put on, and we've done a bit of texture. So so that kind of makes your pot a little more special. And now we have to put a lid on it. So I showed you how to do collars. This is a big collar. There's the little one that I threw in the video for beginners on. And there's a larger one, so I don't know which one will work here. I think I'm just going to try this one. And then the lid is kind of exact, so I need to trim it down so it will fit inside the bowl. So you place it upside down, make it as centered as possible. That's better. And then you trim off as much as you want. You can use calipers so you don't have to take it on and off. I just trim it a little bit and then take it off, put it on the pot and see what type of fit it is. But you can measure with calipers if you want now, make it so you don't have to take it off center each time you take it off. jar, and we have a lid that's had quite a bit taken off. Let's see how close we are. And we are perfect. All right. Remember, when you make it really tight, I glazed my lids all the way over, and so that has a thickness. I also glazed the flange, and the glaze actually creates an extra thickness on the flange itself as well. So then the lid, if it's tight now, will not fit later on. So I leave a little bit of space so that the lid will tighten up once you've got it glazed. But that's the lid on the jar, and you could do a little texture on the lid with the chattering tool if you want to as well. You can simply place it in, or wet the rim, stick it on the wheel head like we did before as well, and that will help it stick. And then you take your chattering tool and you simply place it on. And the knob is wobbling a little bit because it wasn't perfectly in center, but nobody will ever know about that because it's not spinning when people are using it. And you get a little texture on the lid as well. And you have a nice little jar for storing whatever you want to put inside it. And you know, you could keep texturing. I like to leave texture just on the bottom, but you could texture the upper half of these instead of the bottoms. I always think when people pick a piece of pottery up, they look at it and they're seeing it, and when they turn it over, if it's even nicer on the bottom, that's a great, you know, sort of thing, because you cared about the bottom of the pot too. But okay, so that's the lids. Okay, the other style of lid that we threw, which is this. And I just trimmed it by mistake without forgetting I had to record this, but it came off and it was very rough on the underside. So it comes off. You just simply make yourself a chuck, which I think I told you to do that in the narrow forms video, and you place it on top of your chuck, and you should be able to center it fairly easily just by adjusting it, and then you just trim it as normal until you got it so it fits inside the jar. So this type of lid is really quick to make, and you know, the other style I like as well, but when I'm doing these I often just make these lids just for speed because they're very easy, as you can see from the throwing, and you just have to make sure you're fairly accurate and with a little looseness. Don't go too tight, because the glaze will build up thickness here and on the inside of the rim there, so when it goes on it'll be a little tighter after the firing. But that's the easiest style of lid if you're looking to make some pieces as a beginner. This one I recommend doing. Okay, the last thing I think we need in this video is just trimming one of these footed pieces that you don't have the ability to lay it upside down on a wheel head. So that's when you use a chuck, and you can throw these varying sizes. I recommend you would make at least 4 or 5 of these for a studio. I have, you know, this. You can even use a yoga carton, but they collapse quite easily. But I have a variety of these hanging up, different sizes. The idea is you basically place your ball. If it has an irregular rim that can't sit and be damaged on the wheel head, you can make a chuck. Let's turn this on. It will actually allow you to trim it without damaging the rim. It's just about centered, but you just have to adjust it. There you go. And trimming tool. And then you can trim as normal. When you've got a handle down the side of the piece like this, it makes it a bit harder for trimming as well. If you have some chucks, you can actually trim uneven forms, and you get a nice foot on the bottom of your piece. Can't do any chattering on these ones. trimming left in there. So there's a different type of handle and trimming a foot on a chuck. So you have now made mugs, centering, and you've basically got bowls covered and plates covered. And now we've added some elements of detail that you can do to your pieces, lips, handles, feet. So we've covered everything for the actual basic forms. The narrow forms means you can make small bottles, lotion pumps, and doll necks. So I'll figure out what the next one. We're halfway through the videos at this point anyway. I'm trying to cover about 8 of the actual forms making, but one of them's got to be glazing and kiln firing at the end. And then we'll talk about where you can sell, what you have to do to be able to sell something, and that involves where you want to go to sell to, long distance, close to home, and such, online, and local coffee shop. Right, okay, we'll talk to you in the next video. Hope you're getting these and finding these useful.